Hey, what's up everybody? Happy spring. Mugsy here, coming at you to celebrate Earth Day. I am so happy that it is finally spring. It's a beautiful day. I feel the sun on my face and I can't wait to show you how I made this worm composter, because what better way to be a steward of our beautiful planet than to take our waste and turn it into healthy compost for our gardens. We are closing that gap in our waste production. We are getting in tune with the cycles of life, and it's fun. Another reason I really wanted to make this worm composter is because I have had this design in my mind for a really long time, the worm Ouroboros. I thought it was kind of a cool image. And recently, Cece went and adventured into Union Square to pick up some worms from the Lower East Side Ecology Center. And I figure, hey, worms double their population about every 8 weeks or so. So why not create another bin so that we can double our compost? This is a really simple design. I am using 2 bins, one that is bigger and one that is smaller. And the way that this works is that this one, nestled inside, has some holes that I drilled, and this outer bin where I did my design, it also catches the runoff, the worm tea as they call it, and that is going to be a delicious fertilizer as well for our garden. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a drill with an 1/8 of an inch drill bit. That's a good size hole because the worms are less likely to slip out of that. Now they can get through, but bigger holes and they are definitely going to be exiting your worm composter, as well as other bugs being let in, which we might not want. I drilled 40 holes in the top for aeration, about 15 in total on all of the sides, and about 10 on the bottom. For the outer bin, I don't drill any holes, but in order to spray paint, first I rough up the surface to break away the plastic coating. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to wipe away any debris, after which I can spray my plastic primer. After waiting 5 minutes for it to dry, I spray my base coat. For my worm Ouroboros, I made a stencil that I'm going to use for spray painting. So I drew the outline and then I cut it out with an X-Acto knife. "30 minutes after my base coat dried, I taped this as carefully as I could onto my bin. And then I gave a nice light coat of the pink spray paint. Now it's a little bit fuzzy on the outside. This is actually my first time ever working with spray paint, but I kind of like the effect. And then I went in with a Sharpie to add in some of those last details. Lastly, I sprayed it with a sealant, which will keep all of my spray paint from running. So you want to use a kind of worm called a red wiggler. Now, I know you might be tempted to just pull out some earthworms from your garden outside, but first of all, those gardens need those worms, and also those are not the kind of worms that are going to thrive in here. You really want to get some red wigglers. Those are the ones that are going to create the most compost for you. It's pretty simple to maintain a worm composting system. You obviously are going to feed it your food scraps, so your apple cores, your banana peels, things of that nature. You're going to want to stay away from animal products like meat or dairy because that can attract rats, and obviously we don't want that. But eggshells is fine. I would stay away from the yolk. But in addition to these food scraps that you can think of as being wet, you're going to want to mix in some dry stuff. Dried leaves, for example, or strips of paper, newspaper. This is a really important part of composting. We call this greens and browns. And the greens, they provide nitrogen, which is the #1 element that plants need to grow, and the browns provide carbon. But it's not just about these elements, it's about creating a balanced environment, because if you just put a bunch of wet food scraps on top of each other, you're gonna get a nasty, slimy mess. However, you mix it with some dry stuff and you'll actually get beautiful soil. Coffee grinds, interestingly, are brown, but they would fall under the category of green because what they do predominantly give is nitrogen. So I started, when I made this bed in here, I added some of those foods as well as some soil to create a nice habitable environment for my worms to start. And I sometimes will I'll sometimes freeze my food scraps because that helps them break down even more. You're gonna wanna cut your scraps into pieces. Worms like it better that way, they'll eat it faster. And when it comes time to harvest, just feed your food scraps on one side of your bin. Your worms will migrate there and you should be left with the compost on the other side. Another way you can do this is you take a pile of compost and you just start to skim it off the top, and the worms, they don't like light, so they'll travel down and you can kind of separate out your worms from your compost. Now you can use it fresh from your bin, but it is recommended that you cure it first. So you leave it in a container with some holes for some aeration in a cool place for about 8 weeks or so. And what you'll get is something that is much easier for your plants to take up. So it makes the nutrients more available. So it takes some time, but it is a beautiful process, and for me, a very spiritual one. It feels so good to take my trash and turn it into gold, as it were, to take the scraps from what I ate and turn it into new food. Just so cool. I think the world is really beautiful, that cycle. So that was why I made Bura Bura Forba, which means filth eater. And I hope that this inspires you to get connected to the cycles of decomposition, because the worms are gonna have the last laugh at the end of the day. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you take the time to look at all the beautiful flowers, feel the sun on your face, spend some time breathing in the fresh air, be kind to each other, and I'll talk to you soon.